There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Perfect.
Alrighty. So to start with, why don't you tell us about your latest YouTube video?
Yes, that was a fun one. We went back and did the June 20th event with the one and only Chris Broyles. He we had set something up several weeks ago when I was doing the initial video for the June 20th event, my full breakdown. But that was during the government shutdown, and unfortunately, Chris said they were not allowed to do outside interviews unless it was pertinent to their operations. So we had to delay that. I wanted to make it one whole video, but we had to split it into two. But I'm still happy with how this one came out, and he had some great stuff for us. The Tornado Genesis stuff is really interesting, and he said he's working on a lot of other cases with Tornado Genesis. The Omega Project stuff is kind of on hold, he said, for now. But yeah, they're kind of just getting ready for the switching of the models. The HREF is going to switch out and stuff like that. So they're putting that on hold for a little bit, and they're really diving into the Tornado Genesis stuff. So expect a lot more of that in the future. And he is definitely open to collaborating with me again on videos in the future. So that is pretty exciting, and I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah, honestly, I think a lot of people here quite love Broyles.
Yes, Broyles is a legend. He's had I think he's had definitely a reputation shift in the past few years, especially after April 2nd. He used to be the guy that was extremely aggressive with the outlooks, and now, everybody's starting to see just how smart he is and how good he is at his job. So that's been great to see, and it's been great working with him. The way we do the videos is I basically just set up the mic and set up the computer, and I just let him talk as long as he wants, and just let him cook, so to speak. Just so I can really just watch his genius. He's super smart, and he's been great to work with. So I'm very thankful I have the connection with him and am able to pick his brain on this kind of stuff.
So professional yap session.
Mm, kind of, kind of. Yeah, but it's very one sided because I just let him go, and I just am in awe of his brain. So yeah, it's been very cool, and he reached out to me, which is a cool part. That's was kind of a pinch me moment when he first reached out to me and wanted to do a collaboration on the YouTube channel. So that was awesome.
Yeah. I am actually going to paste that video here in the chat so that everyone can go check it out once
Sure.
we're done here.
Sure.
I am going to be accepting the questions at this time, just so I can start getting them out until Gabe gets back. So
Sounds
if anyone
good.
has any questions, just pop them in the chat. Chaser Academy members get the priority for questions and stage talking requests, I guess. So once we start getting questions, then I'll start rambling, I guess.
That that works for me.
Radar Shark, what's your question? Gabe
There's
is
Gabe.
here.
Hello, everyone.
Now we can hear you.
How's it going?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Let me put my little light on here so I can grace all of you with my presence. Trey, where are you at?
So I'm on stage as a speaker right now. I don't think we've done what we usually do, where you have me as a co-moderator or whatever. That works.
I'm going to move you to the audience, and then I'm going to bring you back up.
Okay.
And Anna, you just stay put here for a second.
Oh, it says stage
till we make sure all the kinks are worked out. Invite to stage. All right, Trey, see if you can turn on the video now.
Let's see. There's the camera set up, but I am not able to put it on, I don't think.
All right. Well, it looks like this week, at least, maybe the people are going to have to forego seeing your handsome face, if that's all right.
That is okay. That's okay by me.
By the way, can you see me or am I blurred out?
You're blurred out now.
Blurred out.
We did see
That
you.
is that
I
is
thought you put your
weird.
hand over your camera.
No. Different personal view. Yeah, I don't know why it's doing that. Seems like maybe Discord is messing up. All right. Well, this is audio only for this office hours because I don't know what's going on. Maybe it was because Anna started it and she doesn't have the proper authorizations, but you should. So, anyways, let's go ahead and get started. Anna, do you have any questions queued up for us?
Not yet. Well, we have one that I am posting right now.
All right. And Trey, I take it you already talked a little bit about your Enderlin video with Mr. Broyles, the man, the myth, the legend himself.
Yes, we did.
We are going to talk about that bad boy a little more in depth next week. A little teaser for all of you people in chat right now who happen to be listening. Just keep your eyes on the announcements channel here in our Discord server, and we will have more details on Monday next week. Trey is going to really go in depth about some of the science that he and Broyles discussed, and
There we go. I got the camera to
then we'll
work.
have a lot of questions. So,
There.
all right, there we go.
There.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on there, but it looks like it is working now. So,
Cool.
We have one question then.
all right, Anna, you want to ask it real quick? I got to pull up that sheet.
Okie doke. So we have a question from Radar Shark, and they asked, why can't people who build interceptors refrain from selling them after 5 minutes?
That's got to be a video game thing, which I know nothing about. I'm guessing.
Yeah, I'm not
I
much
love how
into
the I love how the one question I was hoping was going to give me some time to send out a tweet and pull up the document that has all the questions in it and everything was a video game question for Trey, which is like asking a fish what's the best way to fly.
Correct. Yes, I am not the biggest video game person. I've never owned a video game console in my life. Yeah, and I just don't play video games.
One of the funny things when we first started this whole Discord server was Trey actually was like sending out messages in our moderator chat asking people like what on earth is that? What is this? Like every time we would use Discord specific terminology. So that kind of shows you exactly where he's at on the technology spectrum as far as gaming and Discord and all that jazz is concerned.
Yes, indeed. I'm an old man at heart. I don't do Spotify, but if I did, my music listening age would probably be about 85. So yeah. I'm not the greatest with technology. I mean, I still use iMovie for the YouTube videos, so I mean, you can see how much how not stubborn I am, right?
By the way, I see we do have Phil Johnson from Stormfront Freaks hanging out in the chat tonight. Phil, I'm not going to put you on the spot, at least not 100%, but I'd love to invite you up here to say hello for a second if you'd like. So just let me know if you are listening and good to go by dropping a thumbs up or something in the chat. If you are, we'll pull you up here. If not, no biggie. No biggie at all. Just figured I would throw that out there. Trey, do you hit 16 on blackjack?
I do.
You do.
Yeah. Screw it. I know that's frowned upon etiquette wise, but screw it.
Absolutely.
All right.
We're getting today.
I know you guys are doing a great job getting some questions in. Here we go. Seymour 4198, a Chaser Academy member, asks, generalizing a question I asked in Q&A about a recent specific event, what are some tips for better forecasting over convection? What are we looking at to tell if an event is going to be a big old rainmaker?
It's really the degree of convection, the coverage is going to be related to the forcing. So if you have a lot of forcing, you're going to have a lot of storms. So sharp frontal boundaries, sagging, surging boundaries are no good with a sharp temperature gradient on either side. Really focused troughs with very strong forcing, especially forcing that is parallel to the initiating boundary. That's where the shear vectors come in. Shear vector orientation with respect to the boundary. Yeah, the more subtle the forcing, the better chance for discrete storms. So really, that it comes down to that. Yeah, I would say forcing is the biggest one. Also, forecasting kind of left splits and right splits. Do you have initially straight photographs, multiple areas? A good example of this was May 25th last year. That big moderate risk day from southern Kansas all the way into northwest Texas, that the Valley View day. You had the left splits that just ruined the Oklahoma target pretty much. And so you could have seen those destructive interactions looking at the photographs initially. Fairly straight photographs initially favor more splitting storms. So those left splits from northwest Texas, that area that initiated first, the left splits came up right into Oklahoma and kind of wrecked things there and anything to the north. So looking at the wind profile, straight photographs tend to favor splitting storms. And if you have a tendency for more convection, that means, more chances for storms to interact in a destructive fashion.
Now, how does precipitable water play into all of that? Because I remember watching a Skip Talbot video back in the day, and I don't know a whole lot about forecasting for rain, but I do seem to recall him mentioning something about that parameter being able to give you some insight about whether or not a storm might be water loaded.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. We talked about it in one of the modules we had. I believe it was I forget which one it was, but yeah, precipitable water will tell you is a good guideline for whether how much precipitation a storm is going to have. Generally, anything above about 1.7, 1.75 inches is considered a good environment for more high precipitation supercells. Whereas drier environments, of course, there's a limit to this. You don't want it too dry, but drier environments, in the low to mid 1 range, tend to favor more LP to classic supercells. But if you have a lot of water in the atmosphere, your storm's likely to produce a lot of water, and so your storm's going to be more likely to be HP with more precipitable water in the atmosphere.
Something that Melissa, our COO here at Storm Chaser Coaching, also happens to be my girlfriend. Something her and I were discussing earlier today, Trey. Maybe you can chime in. You don't have to, but we were talking about how there are certain words that are just common parlance in the storm chasing meteorology world and at large, and they're definitely head turners for some people. A lot of people shy away from the word moist. They don't like hearing that. And we use that like it's going out of style. You ever have any interactions with people where you'll just say something and they'll kind of give you the side eye, like, what are you talking about? And you have to explain, no, it has to do with the weather.
Yes. I don't think she's in here, but one of our tour guests, Ash Duncan, she's a member of Storm Chaser Coaching.
Yep.
But she hates when I use the word moist. And so on tour, in my forecast discussions before chases, I always make sure when she's on tour to say moist a lot of times because it makes her cringe a little bit. So I always get a kick out of that.
I thought you were going to go the other direction, good guy Trey, and say that you refrain from using that word. You find something else like water saturation or waterlogged or something like that.
No, I like it moist. I like to use the word moist, and I like it moist. Yeah.
There we go, Trey, leading into it. I appreciate that. Okay, let's go ahead and get to Radar Shark, Chaser Academy member. He has another question, and that is a real one this time. I have a real question now, they say. Why are plain slight risks the GOAT instead of moderate risks? This kind of playing into the meme where a slight risk can go off and give you an EF4, but every time there's a big hype around a setup, it seems to underperform.
Well, if you think about it, a lot of times the moderate and high risks out here, really anywhere, those are your more synoptically evident events. So the big troughs with a lot of ingredients, big cape, big shear, a lot of forcing, and with a higher ceiling comes a higher floor, or a lower floor, excuse me. I always like to use that kind of saying. When you have more, when your event has a higher ceiling, there's a lot more that can go wrong with it. We see it in the Southeast a lot. We see it in the plains a lot. Whereas the slight risks and the lower end days tend to be those, and sometimes your enhanced risks as well, but the slight risks, Those tend to be your more subtly forced days in a lot of cases. Of course, not always. You can have big trough days that are more slight risk days. But a lot of those are going to be your more subtle days that don't have the huge parameter spaces. Those tend to go off a little bit more. Your outflow boundary days, with subtle forcing, those kind of days, those are the best days. And so I think that's just what it comes down to. Personally, I like chasing the slight risks a lot more than the synoptically evident days, the big, moderate, and high risks. I have much more fun. I'm sure a lot of people do as well. But I have a lot more enjoyment with those lower end days than the big synoptically evident days.
Now, do you notice those days as well tend to have a lower number of people out chasing? Is that possibly another reason why you enjoy that more?
Not so much. Chaser convergence is not really something that I worry about too much nowadays. I just kind of factor it into my chasing strategy, just because it is what it is now. I think when I first started coming out to the plains in 2015, there was certainly a difference between the lower end days and the big days as far as chaser convergence goes. You could tell a difference. Today, you really can't, even on the low end days, especially if it's in a popular area like Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. Everybody and their mother is going to be out anyway. So it doesn't really matter that much anymore. And it's just something that I factor into my strategy now. As you get into the later into the season, those lower end days, like in late June, July, those can be really fun because that's when you start to see a drop off. Not as many chasers out there, and so those are a lot more enjoyable. I had one of my private tour last July with a couple of guys after my tour season. I did a private tour in mid July, and that was awesome. Those were some kind of lower end days that were not really all that popular among chasers, and we got some awesome stuff. And that was one of my most fun weeks of the year. So, yeah, not so much in the heart of spring, but once you get kind of on the fringes of the season, so to speak, can be a difference in chaser convergence.
By the way, if you folks think there's a lot of moisture on the public tours, oh boy, you should see the private tours. So just let your imaginations run wild there. Steven, our very own Steven, hogging the chat, asking questions, taking away time from the users. Thanks, Big Dog. We appreciate that. He wants to know what was a better chase for you, Briggs or Holly?
Oh, that's a tough one. That is a tough one. Both were great for us. Both were on tour, and both had a great group of guests. So we got to see it with them, which was awesome both times. That's a tough one. I mean, Briggs we got closer to, so it wasn't as strong of a tornado, obviously. But I don't know. That's a tough question. Holly was my number one for a while, and then Briggs happened, and I kind of questioned it. I think if I had to pick one based on how we played it as is, of course, if I were to do it over again, I would do some things differently, maybe. But I don't know. I might have to take Briggs just because we got to get right up close to that thing, and we were maybe an eighth of a mile from it at most at times, and the guests were just flipping out. And that was such an awesome group of guests that we had on that. That was Tour 2, 2025. And nothing against any of the other tours, but I think that was my favorite group of guests ever. They were so awesome. Every single one of them was just so into it. Not that everyone isn't usually, but sometimes you get folks that are, not quite as into it as others. But that group was just so into it. And we got, it was also what was special too for me was that tour. I was leading that tour. Holly, I was not leading that tour. I was on the tour, but my boss was on that tour with Briggs. I was leading that tour and making a lot of the decisions. And we just executed that day so well. And so I might have to say Briggs from a chasing perspective. Holly, obviously the better tornado, but Briggs just sharing it with those people and getting as close as we did safely. I think I'd probably have to take Briggs.
Very nice. And we have another question from Radar Shark here. If you folks are wondering why Radar Shark is getting yet another question, and some of you have had questions in the queue for longer, just a reminder that being a Chaser Academy member will bump you to the front of the line. This is the free show, so it is available to everyone, but we still give that perk to the premium users, the subscribers, the Chaser Academy members, you can find out more about the Chaser Academy in the Chaser Academy tab on the left-hand side of the screen, or you can ask somebody in support or someone in the chat here, and we can talk to you about that. But we will get to all of your questions eventually. So don't worry, stick around if you have your hand up. If you've asked a question like 15 minutes ago, I promise you it is on our list and we will get to it. So Radar Shark asks, do you think the tri-state tornado was actually on the ground for that long? And I've wondered about that myself. Very similar to the Mayfield tornado. You know, I think we call that the quad state supercell now. Do you think that the tri-state tornado is actually something more along the lines of the tri-state supercell?
Well, so I did the video on the tri-state tornado. Was it last year, maybe, or 2 years ago? I can't remember exactly. I think it was last year. And there's some pretty good research out there, specifically, I believe, from Maddox et al., Maddox et al., who looked back at the track and looked at a ton of eyewitness reports and other stuff. And it appears that it was a family of tornadoes. I can't remember exactly. I think initially, near the start of the path, it was a few different vortices, and then toward the middle and end of the path, that was one continuous track. So I think the majority of it was continuous, but I do think there was some intermittence with the how it was on the ground, so to speak, at least at the start of the track and maybe toward the end of the track as well. But there was a very good chunk of the track that was continuous. I think over like 170 miles worth of that track was continuous, it appears. So I think it was a family, but I think a good portion of it was continuous.
That good portion of it that was continuous, how does that stack up to the continuous portion of the Mayfield supercell?
So that one was almost continuous. It just barely it was
back in Arkansas, right?
It barely lifted as it went into northwest Tennessee, far northwest Tennessee. It just lifted for a few minutes and then came right back down once it either right before it crossed into Kentucky or right after it crossed into Kentucky. I can't remember off the top of my head, but obviously tri-state it happened. The path was much longer than the quad state, I believe. So I think if we're talking about a percentage of the tornado that was in progress in a continuous fashion, I think the quad state would beat tri-state, but overall the tri-state was on the ground for longer as far as mileage is concerned.
Interesting. So what you're saying is if you went with my outlook on things, which is same supercell, same tornado, then we could just call it the quad state tornado. We wouldn't have to call it the quad state supercell.
No, because I do not recognize that theory. So
fair enough. I have to find a way to work it in there at least like once every couple of months. So
I know you do.
All right, let's get to Courier. I think that's the name. They ask, what was your favorite paper that you worked on for tornadic research? Do you still work on tornadic research as much as you did while still in college? How many papers did you write or help co-author? Lots of questions in there, so I'll just let you handle the first part. What was your favorite paper that you worked on when you were doing tornado research actively? Because I don't believe you're still doing it now. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct. Not in any official capacity.
Right.
But yeah, I did. So I actually didn't specifically write any journal articles when I was at OU. I just wrote my thesis, which I would say is kind of, I hate to use the word crowning achievement because that sounds like I'm being hoity-toity and egotistical, but I'm very proud of that thesis. I wish the topics could have changed a little bit and it would have been a little bit more novel research. But mainly in my thesis, I looked back at 4 different data sets, mobile radar data sets, and just tried to pick out things from those. Not really doing anything new, so to speak, but more so just trying to pick out everything we could from that vortex tilt, bottom up or top down tornado genesis, secondary vortices, vortex interactions and stuff. And you can actually see my thesis. My thesis is public. If you ever want to fall asleep, you need something to fall asleep, read my thesis. It's about 150 pages, and it will probably put you to sleep. But there's some interesting stuff in there. So if you ever want to do that, it's online. Just look up my name and University of Oklahoma thesis, and you'll find it. But I would say that's kind of my crowning achievement. Now, we're starting to come out with papers from research that I did at OU. So oftentimes what happens, at least in my experience with working with Howie, is you'll write your thesis and then certain journal articles come from your thesis. And most of the time if I were still there, I would be writing them myself. But because I'm not there anymore, Howie is writing them for me, basically. He's the lead author, so I would be a co-author on that. And we're also starting to release some papers. We just came out with some papers recently, a couple of papers, I believe, with Howie and Roger Wakimoto, who does famous tornado scientist. He's a professor at UCLA. He worked with Ted Fujita, but he does photogrammetry. So he was with us for the Selden, Kansas case on May 24th, 2021. And we got a great radar data set, and he was right next to us getting pictures so he could do photogrammetric analysis. And he also went up in a helicopter and took damage pictures as well. So we have a couple of papers that have just come out on that. And then we are doing, we have one more coming out from Selden on an anticyclonic tornado that actually impacted us as we were scanning. It was a very, very weak spin up, but it happened right over our heads as the main tornado was dissipating. So we got some excellent data of that as it passed right over the truck. So we have a paper coming out on that. And then that's it for now. I'm not lead author on any of those, but I am co-author on those, which is still, I'm really happy to be a co-author on those. So yeah, so that answers that, I think.
Now, real quick, Trey, I'm going to ask you to explain photogrammetry because it is an absolutely fascinating discipline. And just if you want to like briefly touch on it, and then I'll advise people if you want to learn a little bit more about it and see it in action. I know that Skip Talbot, Pecos Hank, was it Anton Simon, all worked on a project together for the Pilger tornado, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes,
they used
I
photogrammetry
believe so.
to determine the speed of some of those satellite vortices or
Right.
satellite tornadoes.
Right. And I'll actually put the paper in the chat. So this is the paper that was just released with Roger Wakimoto as lead author there. But photogrammetry is basically just you take a bunch of pictures of the tornado, and you can basically figure out how fast debris is moving from the photographs. If you know some of the information about the camera, the distance from the tornado and from the debris, which we knew exactly where we were. I had a tripoded video that day as well that Roger used in that analysis. And so, yeah, you can basically take photographs, track debris, and see some of you can estimate the structure of the vortex and some of the wind speeds in the vortex just from photos. And what was special about this case is we had that plus the radar data to confirm it. So it was a very unique case in that regard because it's very rare to get that that good of a data set that we got from radar and then have the photogrammetry with it. So yeah, so that's a really cool paper. Check it out if you're interested. I just put it in the chat there.
Awesome. And I'm going to leave questions open for about 18 more minutes here. We'll turn them off at 8:50 Eastern time. So if you have anything that you think of you'd like to ask, as long as you get it in by the deadline around 8:50 Eastern time, then we'll make sure it gets answered. Coral, Lil Coral, Lil. Is that like your rapper name? Do you have a mixtape? You can drop that in the chat too if you'd like. They ask, what would some good things to put on my truck for storm chasing next year be?
That depends on your goals. You know, I like to have a dash cam with a nice 4K camera on it, so I can just let it record, focus on driving. If I'm driving, I just let it sit there on the dash and let it record 4K video. I also like to have a GoPro, and DJI just came out with a nice camera like that. Yeah, I keep it pretty simple. I don't like it to have a lot of distractions, and I think that I always advise folks to have as little distractions as possible, because there's just so much that's going on. You have to really focus on driving and safety. So I keep it as distraction free as possible. I've never really used a laptop mount myself. I like to just use my phone or an iPad or something. But that's teach their own with that. If you like to have a laptop, then go for it. But yeah, I would just keep it simple. You don't need light bars. You don't really need any of those gadgets on the outside. I chased in a Honda Civic for years, and with nothing flashy on the outside, and it worked great for me. So you don't really need anything special. Just have make sure you have your documentation stuff, cameras that you want, and then have a source of data that's reliable, and you should be good.
All right, sanest Northeast chaser, you are being invited to speak up on the stage. Oh, they put their hand down, I think.
Yeah, they
I
asked it
think
in the chat.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
there you
see it
go.
right
There you
there.
go. There you go. You can
So,
invite.
okay, they're putting their
Yeah.
hand back up. Perfect. All right, hop on up here now, sanest Northeast chaser.
Sorry, I'm on my phone right now, and so I had no idea what the hell was going on and how.
We don't
So-
either. Don't worry, we have no idea.
Okay, so yeah, I'm basically going to parrot what I said in chat. I'm trying to better understand like the role that nudgers and other kinds of storm and environment interactions play in aiding tornado genesis. And so like I mean, so I was just kind of like thinking, just like kind of off the top of my head, like what would you think the ideal environment would be like for a real like clean tornado genesis, without any kind of like surprise rear flank shrimper cell mergers or nudgers or boundary added vorticity, any shenanigans that might aid that in an a parameter space that would other, or I guess physically what was happening under the storm that would uh, not allow tornado genesis without any of those like kinds of events taking place. Like, what would you kind of be expecting as far as like things that the storm is doing?
I'd actually almost go the other way with that and say I just expect that you have to have a nudger every time now, just based on what Cameron and I have talked about and what I've read in his work. It's very, very, very rare to get a super clean tornado genesis case, and really those cases are going to be your boundary cases, the boundary latch cases. You really don't need a lot, or any auxiliary cells to help in those cases. You can just have the storm latch onto the boundary, and that can just be enough. So it's very, very rare to get clean tornado genesis. Usually it happens. Just from kind of anecdotal evidence here, this is not anything that I have looked at in depth, but just stuff that I've kind of gathered from Cameron's work and such. It's a lot of times the cases with weak storm relative inflow, so not the Mongo photographs, but it can also tends to happen in the huge parameter spaces. You see it a lot in the southeast, particularly in the prefrontal or open warm sector regime, where you can get those just small beans that do it without any auxiliary cells. That seems to be the most common method for that to happen without a boundary or any shenanigans. It's those little beans in the warm sector. Oftentimes you just don't need anything at all, and usually those are going to be in your really big parameter spaces, at least as far as I've seen. April 27th had some of these. They also had some really good merger examples or nudger examples, Tuscaloosa being one of those. But there are also some storms that were just out in the open with really no sort of nudgers or any auxiliary cells at all. I believe Coleman was that way on that day. That was a good example. So it depends, but again, really clean tornado genesis is very, very rare. And usually that is reserved for more of your boundary cases, but it can happen outside of the boundary cases in those either a environment with very little storm relative inflow or just the massive parameter spaces, at least as far as I've seen.
Solid answer to a very solid question. Let's see. Are we out of questions in the queue? I think that's the first time in 2 months of doing these we've ever been caught up in the queue mid-show. So you folks just happen to be the worst audience that we've ever had. So I don't know what to tell you. This is nuts. I'm just going to go through chat and pick out some of the interesting stuff. Trey, if you want to riff on some of it, that's cool. If not, we'll just give people some shout outs until we get a couple of questions back in the queue.
Yeah, get those
I do
questions
see,
rolling.
I do see Radar Shark drew some pictures of some tornado interceptor vehicles. Very cool. I don't know if you see that picture, Trey, but I like Dorothy. Dorothy's kind of blocky and a little awkward looking, but that's probably my favorite one there.
Yeah, those are good. I like those. Yeah.
Very cool. Let's see here. Storm Guy posting some great photos. I really like the black and white ones. Those are really cool. I love the contrast. The colors are obviously beautiful on Supercells, but I'm just a sucker for a high contrast black and white photo. Always have been. So just something about that aesthetic that appeals to me a lot. So cool photos there in chat, Storm Guy.
There we go. There's a question.
All right, we find one. There we go.
Yeah.
Shadow Magic. Is it true that mini supercells can produce wedge tornadoes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. I don't know what else to say with that, but yeah, they can absolutely produce wedge tornadoes. We saw it. One of the good examples I can think of was December 28th, 2024. The stuff down by Houston and then Port Arthur. But you had the stuff out in Mississippi, the warm sector stuff. That Butte, Mississippi supercell was just a little bean, and it produced a pretty stout wedge. So yes, absolutely.
I do. Someone said we aren't the worst. I don't know, man. It's our job to be here and answer the questions. It's your guys' job to ask the question. So if only one of us is holding up our end of the bargain, I don't know what to tell you. You know,
they're not the worst.
Like I see them.
They're not the worst.
They're
they're just a little shy. That's all.
Just a little shy. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Sanus Northeast Chaser.
We have
Sanus
one
Northeast
first.
Chaser. Okay, go ahead.
From Nick, what started my interest in weather? I don't really know off the top of my head, honestly. But what I do remember, the farthest memory I can think of that far back was I remember watching a 48 Hours documentary on the Bridge Creek F5 on May 3rd, 99. And I remember watching that and being hooked after that, kind of. I don't know if I was already hooked by that point. I assume I probably was if I was watching a 48 Hours documentary at age 3 on tornadoes. So I assume it was before that, but I can't remember that far back. And then I watched Twister with my parents, and the rest was history. So I know for sure by age 2 to 3, I was already well into weather. But I don't know the initial thing that got me into it. But those were kind of some things that really helped me out on that journey initially.
Watching those sorts of documentaries at age 3 is like some MK Ultra level nonsense. Like you're just being like, you're like a steady stream of weather data being fed into your brain because the CIA wanted Convective Chronicles to be a YouTube channel in 30 years.
Yeah. I would do forecasts for my parents. Gary England was featured heavily in that 48 Hours documentary, so he was someone I looked up to when I was little. So I would always pretend to be Gary England when I was 3 or 4 in front of my parents doing fake severe weather coverage. I was always into it. I've always been into mathy stuff and numbers and whatnot. My parents made sure to read to me and do brain forming activities when I was little. So I think that kind of helped that, but
right. Virtuoso, prodigy. You know, Mozart, he did symphonies when he was a kid and you started forecasting. So
yeah.
All right. Let's go ahead and invite Sanest Northeast Chaser back up onto the stage. You are good to go, my friend.
So I guess since I have a little bit of time because the questions aren't going crazy, I just want to say, first of all, thank you. I think that's the first time nudgers clicked intuitively for me at how they work. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And a second, I guess I said this in chat, but I'll try and keep a close eye on those boundary cases, because most of our supercells are just discrete cells in general, are those prefrontal warm sector convection cases in front of those massive summer squall lines.
Right.
So I'll keep my eyes and ears peeled. And the last thing is, so I think everyone or most people know this, is our peak tornado month is July, but that actually doesn't coincide with our peak significant tornadoes. Most of our significant tornadoes happen April, May, June, and then the actual intensity of the tornadoes trends down, because most of our tornadoes are just QLCS slop nados. So I just wanted to ask, like, what are some of the key things that you look for when trying to pursue or forecast possible QLCS tornado events?
That's a tough one. I can't actually think of a time when I actually set out to chase a QLCS tornado event. But if you're looking for QLCS tornadoes, it's going to be how your shear vector, your low to mid-level shear vector is oriented to the line. So, I believe the papers that are out there use the 1 to 3 kilometer vector, but you can use a lower vector like a 0 to 3 kilometer shear vector, or even 0 to 1 kilometer shear vector as a proxy for this. But usually you want your low and mid-level shear to be more perpendicular to the line, your shear vector to be more perpendicular to the line, because that's going to allow for more of those kind of surging out of portions of the line, and you get those kinks in the line that can have those vortices in it. And so a lot of times you have your squall lines, which are fairly north-south, and then they'll kind of trail off at the bottom end. That bottom end is usually fairly unfavorable for QLCS tornadoes, but that portion that's north-south with a more kind of westerly shear vector, those tend to be, in the low levels, tend to be pretty good for QLCS tornadoes. And also low-level shear. If you have strong low-level shear, that can kind of help overcome that, even if you don't have a great shear vector orientation. If you have just a really strong low-level shear environment, that can help. But usually you really want that shear vector, low-level shear vector orientation to be fairly perpendicular to the orientation of the line. And you also don't want your outflow to be surging out ahead of the line. Sometimes on those squall lines, you'll see the outflow boundary on radar surging out ahead of the line. That's not good for both the intensity of the line as a whole and for QLCS spin-ups along the line.
Salokin, I apologize for butchering that. Salokin Storm Chasing, I believe that's how you pronounce it, asks, why don't tornadoes orbit the mesocyclone? So in like a little circle around like pinballing around the mesocyclone. If the mesocyclone is rotating and the tornado is attached to it, I'm just curious.
Also, they actually can orbit the mesocyclone once they occlude. That is how you get those loop-de-loop
Deviant
paths,
motion.
like a Greensburg, like an Enderlin. Toward the end of the path, you get those loops, and that's because the vortex is actually literally orbiting around the mesocyclone. But during the main portion of the life cycle, you have to think of the tornadic vortex as really just an extension of the mesocyclone to the surface. So it basically is the mesocyclone until it gets cut off. Cold air wraps around it, and then it kind of gets cut off from the main circulation, and then it is at the mercy of the low-level winds, and then it can start orbiting around the mesocyclone once the occlusion process happens.
Norman Smith, shout out. I know Norman. Great to see you here, buddy. He asks a question that I'm going to go ahead and answer for you, Trey. And really, this is kind of shameful. If anybody's been following Trey for a while, you should know this. He asks, what is the go-to table game, or is it slots at the casino? First of all, I'm offended for you that somebody thinks you'd play slot machines. I know you too well to know that you would never. You can't help the strategy aspect of it. So you'd have to play something with some kind of strategy, even if it was just like Baccarat or blackjack or something like that.
I don't know how people play slots. You might as well just light your money on fire. That's much easier if you want to just lose money. I just don't get slots. I play poker. That's my game. Because
Trey's a crusher, by the way. He's a crusher at the poker table.
I wouldn't go that far, but I'm all right. But yeah, poker's my game because it's a skill game most of all. There's obviously luck involved, but have been literal studies, research studies that have shown that it's basically about 90% skill and the rest luck. And so it's the only game that I know I can have an edge over my opponents when I play, and I can actually make money. Because you're not that's one game too. You're not playing against the casino. You're playing against other
Right, you're
people.
playing against other people. Yep.
Right.
Jinx,
So
you owe me a Coke.
yeah, right. So yeah, poker's my game. I don't do any table games outside of that. I've never actually played anything in a casino outside of poker. No
Same
limit
here.
Texas Hold'em. If there was another one I would get into, it might be blackjack, just because there is a little bit of skill involved in that. But again, that's mostly luck. But yeah, I don't do any other games like craps or baccarat or anything. I play poker.
And that's actually one of the ways that to give you folks a little lore about Storm Chaser coaching and how it was formed. Trey and I actually, after doing a Chaser Chat episode together, we would occasionally, maybe once or twice every 2 or 3 months, we would talk about poker hands. I would call him and ask him for some advice, and we would just chat about that. So that's kind of how we got to know each other a little bit better. And Trey, if you want to plug the site that I know you prefer, if people are interested in learning more about poker, and then I will just plug real quick. I do work with my other job besides running Storm Chaser coaching with a company called Upswing Poker. They have some really great stuff, including something called Lab 2.0 and a course called the Poker Blueprint. So if you are a brand new person who would like to learn how to play poker, because I'm not going to encourage that anybody go out there and start doing it if they have a family or they have bills to pay or something like that. But if you're a young person and you'd like to chase storms, and you'd like to see if maybe you could use your intellect to generate a little bit of money and have a little bit of fun in your younger years while you're out running around the country chasing tornadoes, there are worse things to try. At least it doesn't kill your car like DoorDash does. DoorDash is like a slot machine. You never know when your alternator is going to go out. So you roll the dice every time you turn the key in the ignition. So it's Upswing Poker for me. And then Trey, what's the site that you like to use? I know you talk about it a lot.
Yeah, I use Crush Live Poker, Bart Hansen. Yep, I always wanted to. I never played poker just to kind of throw money down and see what happens. I really wanted to learn the game, and it's definitely a very difficult game to master, but it's an easy game to learn. And if you just have some basic level, foundational level skills, you're probably going to do pretty well at low stakes live poker, because the opponents are often pretty soft. Games are pretty soft.
That's one way to put it. That's one way to put it.
Yeah. So if you know the math behind it, pot odds and stuff, and some strategy behind it, it can be a really good game. But yeah, like Gabe said, do not just go out and start pissing money away without some foundational knowledge of how to play the game.
Yeah, and one thing I tell pretty much everybody I meet is that the dream of like making $500 an hour, that's very few people that will ever achieve something like that. That's the best poker players in the world. They make even far more than that. But I think just about anybody who has a reasonable level of intelligence and decides to put the study in could make $15 an hour playing poker. Is that awesome? No. Would you probably be better served having a different job? Yes, but that sort of highlights the fact that it's not something where you're just pissing your money away. And if you are a storm chaser making $15 an hour with DoorDash, I know that Anna's already thinking about it right now because I see her doing DoorDash sometimes. So, yeah, Anna, if you want to come off of... Yeah, Anna's like, hold on a second. Am I going to get some private lessons from Trey and Gabe? Maybe that'll be something fun to do someday. All right. Next question is, by the way, appreciate that, Norman. That opened up a whole can of worms. Trey and I got to talk about something a little bit different, a little fun there for a minute. So, Lil Coral, no mixtape yet, but they are back with another question. Any good tips for storm chasing next year? I've been doing my research, but I wanted some extra pointers. So first of all, stay tuned to the Storm Chaser Coaching YouTube channel. We already have some videos over there. We also have lots of short form content that you can watch. Gives you little storm chasing tips. That's actually what the playlist is called. And then, of course, we're going to be expanding the live offerings that we have. So just keep the push notifications for this Discord server turned on for the announcements channel, and we'll make sure that everybody stays aware of all the cool stuff we're doing. But Trey, do you have any maybe broad overarching tips that you would like to share with somebody who is going into their first year of storm chasing?
Yeah, it's all about safety. Start small. Start with maybe some just local thunderstorm days, general thunderstorm days. See how you're able to forecast and execute a chase strategy on those days. Build up some of that experience, and then start dabbling into more of the severe days. Maybe you don't really want to dive headfirst into a moderate or high risk right away. You want to start on the low end days and get your experience there, and then try to work your way up from there. But safety is number one. For new chasers, I always recommend going out with somebody who can handle the driving responsibilities, and that way you can focus on reading the radar, reading the sky, etc., and get used to that. Because if you're a new chaser and you're trying to juggle all those distractions that come with chasing, it can be pretty dangerous and not a great idea. So try to go with someone if you can. If you can't, again, just try to focus on safety, eyes on the road at all times. If you have to stop, if you have to look at something, pull over, look at your data, and readjust from there. Don't be staring off at the sky when you're driving. You just got to keep those distractions at a minimum. But yeah, safety and start small, I think, would be the general tips I would have for newer chasers.
I actually have 2 cents to put into that since I literally just started chasing this year. I've done 2 chases, one in Arkansas, one in my very second chase, I decided to chase some Dixie slop in Tennessee. So both times I went with a group of people or one other person at least, since I was very uncomfortable doing that myself, especially in Dixie in the hills of Tennessee. But yeah, definitely second on the radar thing. I may or may not have almost rear-ended my chase partner when looking at radar.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to stay focused out there, especially if you're new. That's why, chasing by yourself is so difficult, because there's just so much to keep track of. You're looking at the storm features. You got to look at the radar. You've got to look at the road. You got to know which roads to take. So you're looking at navigational stuff. So it's always good to have somebody or multiple people that can split those responsibilities, especially if you're new. If you get a lot of experience, you can try chasing on your own, but it's even I do it now, and it's extremely difficult. So yeah, I would always recommend going with somebody or a group of people. It's just safer and easier.
I know that this is past the cutoff, but Shadow Magic actually dropped something interesting in the chat, so I figured I would give you a chance to comment, Trey. They said there was one weird tornado genesis thing that came up at one point. You were covering the Rolling Fork storm, and it went tornado mode when it crossed the river. I heard that happened more than once, but there's no proof or data around this strange weather instance.
Yeah, so there's some, obviously I will preface this by saying this is all anecdotal. There's no scientific evidence to back this up that I know of. But I've chased in the Southeast many times. Great setups in Louisiana that look awesome, and then it just turns to slop until it crosses the Mississippi River into Mississippi. Then it tends to go nuts. One of those examples I can think of was May 2nd, 2021. That was a very unique setup out there. It was a very interesting kind of almost cold core-esque day down in the Southeast, which never happens down there. Lots of 3 Cape storms were very, very shallow. And we were chasing it in eastern Louisiana, kind of by the Natchez area in Mississippi. We were chasing it in Louisiana. Storm, it was beautiful supercell, big wall cloud, looked great, looked like it would produce before it crossed the river, and then nothing happened. So we crossed the river into Mississippi, get on the north side of Natchez, the structure starts carving out, and then about 10 minutes later, strong tornado happens just northeast of Natchez. So it's weird. Rolling Fork was another great example of that. I was actually Rolling Fork is a tough one for me because I busted that day because I was on the Louisiana side of the river. But that storm literally passed right over us. I don't think I have any footage on my camera still from that day, but I remember looking straight up at the base of that storm. We were literally right underneath it, right as it crossed the river. We were right on the banks of the Mississippi, and the storm looked awful. It had a very slanted base, very almost elevated looking, strung out, looked terrible. And then, of course, it crosses the river 10 minutes later, it produces a wedge. So I don't know if there's anything there, but I've seen many times where nothing happens in Louisiana, and then once the storms cross into Mississippi, they go ham. So that would be really interesting research to have happen. But right now there's no proof that anything fishy is going on there. But I have a sneaking suspicion there might be.
Okay, Sanist Northeast Chaser back again, just like Slim Shady. Can LLRS be good as another cheat code for high base tornadoes since 3 Cape will naturally be lower?
Yeah, so low level lapse rates, you generally want them to be higher. The rule kind of is, and even for mid level lapse rates too, if they're over 8, your storm is going to be great. That's kind of the tagline. So you want low level lapse rates regardless. I don't know if it's necessarily a cheat code per se, like 3 Cape and Vorticity might be, but it's always a good thing to have fairly steep low level lapse rates. Of course, to a point. You don't want your low levels to be over mixed or anything, and just have kind of adiabatic lapse rates there. That usually means you're going to have an inverted V profile. That's not great, but so yeah, I would say it's not necessarily a cheat code, but it definitely helps. So
Jack in the booth, Jackson Watkins, an OG with Storm Chaser coaching. He asks, or I guess it is a question. So when is the Storm Chase Tinder app coming out? We have talked about this before, actually, on Chaser Chat. We were going to call it chasermingle.com. And we were going to have like chase dating events where you get paired up with people based on your profile and you have to go out and actually chase with them. And I actually contend that this is a great way to go on a date, because if you can enjoy your time with someone for like a 10-hour day of out storm chasing and having to stop for bathroom breaks and having to be in a high stress situation and everything, like that's a relationship built on a solid foundation right there. So I don't know how feasible something like that is. I certainly won't be the one to build it because we've got our hands full over here, but somebody should make something like that. I think it'd be interesting.
yeah, that would be interesting. I think you might do. I mean, there's farmersonly.com. If farmersonly.com,
well, that's what I'm thinking.
can
Like
do it,
exactly.
storm chasers can do it. So
Yep. Exactly. And it really is a very unique lifestyle, by the way. So like if you can find somebody else who's into that sort of thing, like we always talk about how at this point for folks like you and I, driving 10 hours is nothing. That's like just
right.
that's no sweat off of our back at all. And so in that sense as well, long distance relationships don't seem so long anymore. If you don't mind driving 10 hours on a Friday afternoon after work to hang out with somebody for a weekend and then drive back. So just an idea. Just an idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I see Seymour actually said earlier when you were talking about the tips to just focus on chasing structure. Just go out there and learn how to identify the parts of a storm. That's a great piece of advice for starting off. Just look for structure.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have to chase the tornado days to start off. Just chase your lower end days that might have a shelf cloud or just some general thunderstorms. See if you can see, oh, there's a wall cloud, even if it's a non-rotating wall cloud. Oh, there's an RFD cut. Oh, there's a rain-free base. There's the precipitation shaft. So it's just simple stuff like that. Start small and then work your way up.
Shadow Magic says maybe you should do an episode of Convective Chronicles dedicated to the Mississippi River days.
That's a good point. And obviously, it's not.
You'd want to do more research before you put something like that out there, I'm sure.
Yeah, and obviously there have been Louisiana events that have gone big in the past. It just anecdotally seems to be weird. And like has been mentioned in chat, Arkansas tends to do it west of the Mississippi River. There's been a lot of great events west of the Mississippi River in the Arkansas Mississippi Delta. But something down south is weird. Louisiana, Mississippi, something weird is there. It's honestly probably just coincidence, but it's just odd how Louisiana tends to flop while Mississippi tends to go big pretty much a lot of the time.
Great comment by our very own junior coach Steven. Most girls are scared when I offer to take them 7 hours away to a random field. So that's a murder podcast waiting to happen right there.
That is good. I like that.
We do have a couple more minutes. We'll stick around here since we were light on the questions for the first time ever today. You guys better get your act together when you come out next week. Sanus Northeast Chaser says, if it's not too late, an addendum, I was specifically referring to high base events where 3 cape doesn't scream because of higher LFCs. The strong lapse rates help promote convection, thus stretching and tilting and just SHI. So I think they were trying to like sneak in the the curse word without finishing it off like an asterisk. What do you think about that, Trey?
Yeah. For land spouts, you really want steep low-level lapse rates, low and mid-level lapse rates, but you want steep low-level lapse rates. So yeah, definitely something there for high base days. But still, high base days are going to be just in general less likely to produce tornadoes because of the higher cloud bases, better tendency for outflow. But having steeper low-level lapse rates is certainly certainly a good thing. It's certainly a good thing for tornado production in those cases.
Very good. And the last comment I will read is, even if it isn't necessarily for dating, it could be for finding chase partners, says Jack in a Booth, Jackson Watkins. And I'll use this as an opportunity to remind everyone that we do have the Chaser Meetup channel. So, use that however you see fit. If you're just looking for a chase partner, if you're looking for something more serious, you can drop it in the classified section there and see what happens. You miss every shot that you never take. So you might as well start throwing up a couple of half court heaves and seeing what happens.
Yeah, good point.
All right, everyone. Dude, what is going on here? I'm glad I've never been to Louisiana. I have. It smells like ass. Okay, so that's where the chat finds itself right now at 9:05 p.m. Eastern Time. So on that note, we will say thank you all very much for hanging out with us tonight. And we will be back next week, of course, with another episode of Office Hours. I forget who's scheduled for next week, but check the events tab. That'll be up there soon. And then also, we have some big announcements coming out next week. So, like I mentioned earlier, make sure you have the push notifications turned on for the announcements channel, even if it's just for @everyone. That way, you will get notified when we do put out that new stuff, and you're definitely going to want to check it out because it's going to be very cool. So, thank you all very much, everyone. Trey, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And Anna, thank you for holding down the questions.
Yep, thanks, y'all. See you next time.